Doug, welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ari. I appreciate it.
So I want to start with your book, The Art of Flow. We can see it over there behind you in the top right of the screen. Tell us why you decided to write a book. What was the pain point where you were like, I need to tell people about this?
Yeah, most things in life, it comes through adversity or seeing an issue, like find a need, fill a need. And so I was actually working at a company and saw that there was massive slowdowns. And then also like the classic like shadow IT or mini groups doing different things and siloed work efforts, and said, oh, how do we handle that? And what do they call that? And so I ended up working through some projects to making it 5 times better. It was fantastic. But then I took kind of notes and said, why did that work? Why were the things that I put in play work? How did it work? And then work with some other individuals, and it was great interaction. But then I saw how if you look at it from a chance of like turbulence versus laminar, and what I mean by that is, when you go to like the museum and you see that art exhibit and it's like flowing, or like the water that's shooting over into like the different ponds and stuff, and it's like, wow, it's a really clear water spout, or like I touch it and, oh, I didn't know it was water because it was so clear. Well, that's laminar flow. And so I was like, hey, there's something there. Is there a scientific equation that actually maps to this? And there is. It's called the Reynolds number. And so I looked at that, and then I matched that to my learnings, and I said, wait a minute, there's a thing here. But it took me 4 years to write it. And the reason why I had to get it out now is because of AI, generative AI, and where it's moving. Me being someone from the enterprise space that I've worked in for a long time now, I've seen the silos. I've seen how, you know, micromanagement has turned into macro management of using the KPIs and OKRs, and it's not helping. It's actually causing more turbulence. And so now I'm seeing the speed of now catching up to companies. And so I was like, hey, I need to get this out now. I need to help people see where to move and shake, because they're going to start losing market share. And at which point, how can I help them? And so I wrote it and I got it out, and then I had some friends read it actually, and they said, wait, where's the AI stuff, Doug? And I said, okay, hold on. So near the end, I talk about how AI is actually enabled by the same functions, especially with agents and everything that's going on now. So that's kind of where it came out.
So I want to kind of zoom into the problem itself. What is shadow IT? What were the kind of issues the frictions that you were seeing? And tell us a story, give us an example so we can kind of appreciate it.
Yeah. So, if you look at most companies now, and they're very hierarchical in nature, and you have the ability where leadership or C suite saying, we have a need, fill a need, like this is the direction we want to go because the stakeholders that they have, or depending on what kind of like upper management they even have to report to, it all trickles down. And then, but the issue has been, especially with even OKRs and KPIs, is hey, OKRs, this is our general overall arching, like, let's hit this goal. Everyone go do your KPIs. And what are your KPIs? Maybe they're not given to you. Maybe they're said, go figure it out for yourself. But still, there's a start and an end point to all businesses. There's upstream and downstream. What happens is a lot of the upstream either gets lost in the mix in the back office because it's ungathered data, it's decentralized in nature. But then your downstream is usually very dialed in because you have your salespeople, money comes in, money comes out, and it's also visible. And so what happens is when you have OKRs and KPIs and this classic enterprise structure, you get a lot of performative, people doing performative things because they have to see where they show up, and they have to be like, oh, look at me, look at me. And that's not savvy. That's not fast. That's not getting the work done. That's just performing. And so I was like, hey, how do we fix this? And so I was able to write it out and explain it in those manner in the book, to basically say, here's how to find turbulence. Here's where this resistance of turbulence can happen, so that you as a manager, a mid-level manager, or even a senior manager or director can actually see it, so that you can actually thwart it or fight it or push against it. Because the art of flow, or to be in a flow state, is that moment that many of us have been in, especially in the technological world, or just like when you're in a moment, like doing a hobby, something that's very like keen to you and your liking, you may not have all the answers. So it's hard to do, yet you have a lot of fun doing it, and just hours just peel away. So how can we do that? And how can we do that team wise? And how can we do that organizational wise? And that's what I put in the book, to help companies and people learn how to move faster, especially in the world of AI that we have coming into it.
So what I was hearing between the lines is that, we're basically doing local optimizations, each team or each person, and that these KPIs, OKRs, they don't really work together, kind of pulling the ship in the same direction, and maybe even conflicting. Is that a fair understanding?
Yeah, what you end up having is an archipelago, like a bunch of different islands in the same ocean, or a lot of people say like it's a bunch of boats and the tide rises all boats. But the problem is like every boat is another shadow IT or even now shadow AI where you have groups vibe coding on different boats and they're creating the same stuff. So if you're not watching what's going on, if you don't have that overarching like what you're again like your dashboard or leaders that are driving this and actually understanding what the issues are, you're going to have that shadow side of it. You're going to have somebody doing something in the shadows, and it's not exactly their fault. Like it's always blamed on like, oh, it's shadow, it's bad. No, people need to actually own up and be like, hey, this is what we're doing, but we don't really create those environments to do that either. And so then I talk about stuff like brave spaces versus safe spaces because people need to be able to show up, break things, make mistakes, and that's where a real leader has the ability to actually carve out and help those people to kind of polish it and make it nicer, help them know where maybe there's an issue and help them through that and kind of give them a leg up, give them a hand up so that we can actually do it as a team versus the classic example of managers where they say, Ari, don't bring me issues, only bring me solutions. And then those are the managers that you need to run away from because they're not good managers because they're out for themselves and they're not going to teach you. They're just going to use you.
So I want to talk about this concept of brave space, but a second before we get there. So let's say, okay, this probably exists in every business, but we're kind of built to the level that these issues are somewhat invisible. How do we put our head up and actually notice them?
Well, that's actually the fun part is that's where AI is going to help us out a lot. And the reason why is because generative AI is very good at understanding nuance, understanding structure, but we have to kind of build that structure. So a lot of the people that you may talk to on your show, or a lot of people that enterprises are talking to now, this is why everybody's saying, I want a use case. And really a use case isn't a really good term anymore because that's what it was in the old days. Now someone's use case is really just their perspective, their perceived value that you try to bring into your place. And you're like, you spend a year or 8 weeks to a year trying to build it and you fail. And then now you're behind. So should you do that? No, you should look at like where you're driving, where your market is, what your verticals play in, and then how do you drive that forward. But again, like AI is helping because it is that human interaction. It is actually giving us a really good mirror to see, I do this, but am I doing it right? Or am I being biased? Because really, all humans carry about 50 different biases at all times. And so we need to be aware of that so that we can actually drive things forward. And being aware of ourselves is going to help us have better conversations with other teams and not to be biased in that nature as well.
And the concept of brave space, tell me more about this. Is this dynamic between, sometimes we just need to experiment and break stuff first, or is there a different perspective here?
It's a mix, right? Because safe spaces wasn't a bad thing. So I'll say that first, right? It was good because it said, hey, people need time, people need to have a place where they can go. But the problem is it turned into something else. And so depending on the perspective or depending on the person, it became something even other than that. And so a brave space is a way to say, we have to show up. We have to have conversations. It's okay not to get along with everybody. It's okay not to have the same viewpoint because we have so many echo chambers happening right now. We have people that are actually creating AI apps and things to actually create echo chambers because they only want to hear what they want to hear. Nobody's going to win with that. That's how humanity loses very fast because we have to have different perspectives, different understandings. And the same thing that we see like here in California or like the Bay Area, there's so many hodgepodge of different cultures, people, and like understandings. That's why it's Silicon Valley. That's why there's technology gains over anywhere else. We're allowing and embracing that to drive it. And so Brave Space is also it's where you show up. You can show up the way you decide to show up. It's also showing up on social media because in the world that we're moving into a world where if you don't choose how you show up, it'll be chosen for you. And that's not something anybody really wants to do. And so that's kind of the aspect like how do you show up? What do you do? It's okay to pick up stuff that you need to do to get the job done, but you're not there to pick up other people's burdens either. You can put those down. You may pick them up for a little bit and you need to put them back down because that's not your deal. But again, help your teams out in the same way and kind of classic follow the golden rule.
Is this just a personal decision for their employees, or there's a pre-requirement here on culture? And the reason that I say that is I've seen environments where employees that kind of try to lead and kind of talk about the issues and how we might solve them, and that's shut down and they're actually perceived as negative actors. Is there some dynamic here between the culture and, brave space or how the individuals are.
There is, and the hope is that leadership does take kind of this role on. And the reason why we need to make a change is because humanity in general is very reactive by nature. Sadly, we only get a stop sign in a four-way street when somebody gets hit by a car or something like that, or we get a stoplight, those kind of things. Or hey, there's a wildfire. How do we fight that? Like, but there's ways to prevent that. There's ways to prevent a lot of this, or at least take the percentage out of it happening out of the equation. And so the idea there is saying, how do we help people out more? And again, like in the past, we haven't really known about people. We haven't really had that like empathy side. We've kind of forced empathy onto businesses, but we haven't had a way to really define it. And now AI is giving us that ability to say, you know, oh, I need to type out this email to like this particular person or this particular team. And here's how I want to say, or here's what I want to say. And then the AI is like, wow, are you okay? Like, you sound kind of mad. And you're like, oh, I'm not mad. And it's like, oh, well, there's a lot of like nuance in here. You may want to be aware of how it's going to be perceived. You're like, oh, I didn't really think about that. And so those are the kind of like situations we're kind of seeing that nuancy change already happening. And I think it's better now to be aware of it. And so being a practitioner in the space that I am and talking to many people around the world, I'm seeing this. And so by me seeing it, I'm trying to also get it out there and say, hey, if I am seeing this, it's either coming or it's already here. And it's also something that I even use with my own teams to kind of be able to say, let's keep everything on status quo. I don't need to hide as much of like information. There's certain things that managers need to hide or leaders need to hide. Not really hide, but like people don't need to know everything. Yet it's okay to share that because you want to grow your team. You want to grow those people. And if they're not growing, why do you want them there in the first place? It's that classic Steve Jobs thing of like, I'm not hiring you to make me go do the work because I'm doing it for you. Like, I'm hiring you because you're the best at it. Come do the work for me and be the best at it. Like, let the people be what they're good at. Nobody went to work every morning and go like, I'm going to be the worst worker today that I've ever been. No, but they may need some nuance, they may need some knowledge, and they may need a little bit of like, hey, I'm part of the team. And by a part of the team, I can answer those questions you may have questions about.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, right? There's certain risks that happen to the business that, as an executive, you might not want to expose those risks and kind of get your team into this panic situation. But on the other hand, the flip side of that is, well, if we're kind of saying, no, no, this problem doesn't exist, and the team is coming and saying, well, we're concerned about, for example, AI and how this is going to impact us, and management is, no, no, everything's fine. That creates distrust. How do you balance this?
Yeah. So part of what I do there is I actually have a framework called the ACT model, ACT. So it's alignment, clarity, and transparency. And so that's how I lead teams. And so I build the alignment and say, like, hey, here's what we're overarching trying to do, the goal, the understanding, and then know that not everybody understands what that means. And so you need to build clarity and say, hey, I'm going to come to your level and I'm going to explain the same thing and actually have feedback and say, let's see. Do you understand what that overarching like account like the side is? So the alignment side, and then the clarity helps do that. And then through that clarity, you then transparently or using transparency show the win. And when you show that win, whether or not you're a vendor working with a client or a client looking for a vendor, if you see the transparency layer and then you come back to that person and build that clarity back and go, hey, I showed you the transparency. You see it. It's just obviously it's right there. It's in front of your face. Like, this is great. Did that hit the mark? Yes, clarity. Then the alignment is like, great. Well, what do you want to do next? All of a sudden, you just gain trust with that person, whether it's on any level. Things I talk about even on stage is that when I go to a trip or something, I come back for my kids. I'm like, hey, kids, I'm going to go on a trip. I'm going to come back. When I come back, we're going to get ice cream. And then what happens is like, if I don't come back and we don't get ice cream, well, then they're gonna be like, I don't trust that. I don't trust dad anymore. So it's a matter of like, again, it works with family as well. It builds that trust factor.
Yeah. So I mean, like, here's an example of something you should not do, and yet I would argue this is what most people do. A team member comes to present an executive with a certain risk. The executive makes some kind of excuse that no, that's not a real problem. Go away. The employee gets frustrated that they're kind of airing this thing that they truly believe is a risk. And what the executive is actually doing in the background is trying to figure out what that even means. Is it true? As opposed to say, hey, let's work together to understand this. So you're destroying risk as opposed to creating it. It's such a dangerous cycle because then that employee feels frustrated that they're unable to communicate that something that they feel that is important, and they feel basically ignored, and now they're just going to create more turbulence as opposed to the organization working together.
Right. Or they're not going to bring it up again because they weren't really heard. And so if they're not
Right.
heard or they're not understood, they go, well, I can't take it to that leader again because that leader's not going to listen to me and he's not a part of the solution. Again, it goes backwards, right? Like they're just giving issues. But like the other issue is that maybe that leader didn't want to engage at the level of that individual because that leader didn't want to look like they didn't understand. Versus if they worked together, they could have both understood both sides of it and then created like a knowledge base article or created some way to kind of like explain to everybody else. You go, hey, wow, look what we found. This is really cool. I bet you other teams in the same environments are having the same issue.
And I would argue that the situation is even worse. It's not that that individual will not come to you again with a problem. Other team members who see, oh, this is how executives respond, they'll be like, okay, we're not going to come with problems because they're just going to be ignored. So now you've
Right.
created this toxic culture where team members are just ignoring risk. And I don't think any business manager wants that to happen.
Yeah, that's right. That's where I talk about. It's like, when I go to some of these C suites, I have these conversations like, look, all those tenants you have on the wall don't mean anything if you don't follow them. If leaders don't follow them and don't have this, this culture of like, hey, we do this really well, we do that. This is how we're supposed to show up. But then the person above you is not doing that. Everybody below is talking about it and going, well, they don't do that. And here's what that happens when they do this. And here's my experience. So yeah, it's lost. It becomes a toxic culture, it becomes that literally that interaction becomes the culture. The stuff on the wall is no longer the culture.
I think that's such a core point because if you have the stuff on the wall, but when you're making a decision, you're ignoring it, that's a real problem. Especially if the decision that you're making is contradicting the values. And I can't count how many times I've had people tell me this is what's happening in our organization, but we have this, this value in the company. It's in contradiction. It doesn't
Yeah, and
align.
you can't get it, right? It's just it's on the table over there, but you can't even get to that table to grab the value because it's impossible to touch.
Yeah, and that creates a level of frustration I don't think that executives, oftentimes appreciate. So the world changed in a very significant way a couple years ago when ChatGPT came and then Claude came and everything happened. The future of work is slowly changing in pockets, but my feeling is that those pockets at some stage are just going to explode. And what that possibly might mean is mass unemployment, which we don't know exactly what this is going to look like. But it's very clear that what roles and jobs and even flows and structures in companies look like today in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's not going to look the same. My question to you is twofold. One is it's almost impossible to know what that future is going to look like. So asking you, well, what it might look like is one question, a hard one. But I think more importantly is we kind of know that it's going to be different. We have some guesses about what it might look like. How do we prepare ourselves to this unknown future?
Understand. So AI, especially generative AI that's here right now, is incentivized in nature. So by incentivized, whatever is put into it, whatever company, whatever type, whatever LLM information has been ingested, what synthetic information or human information, all that is still incentivized. It still wants to get the token. It still wants to do well. Even with Claude's new Mythos, they had a psychiatrist interview Mythos and said like, "Hey, let's go see how this thinks." And it very much wanted to make the psychiatrist, therapist happy to answering all the questions, and it was very excited about it. But at the other side of it, acidification, right? Then you have autotelic responses. And so autotelic responses, again, where you see the stuff in the news and it says "Well, the AI that we told to turn off didn't turn off and it said no. Okay. Well, what was the goal of that you gave it before it did that? Oh, the goal was stay up 99% of the time and get the job done no matter what. Great. Why'd you tell it to turn off then? Because you just told it to do all the alternative of what the autotelic response is supposed to be doing. And so the same thing happens with a lot of these is that you look at it and you're like, oh, you hear this like story and it's kind of not right. Like the rogue AI did a thing. Really? Why? Why? What was its main, factor that you told it to build that? Same thing with like OpenClaw and some of these other ones. Like, oh, it built these OpenClaws, they think for themselves and they built their own religion. Really? then why is there an API call to some of these backends in this environment like Moltbook and some of these other things that is potentially allowing humans to push them in a certain direction? Is that it's not still autotelic? Like it is. So when you look at the future, we have to look at it as in we can only really guess and guesstimate really what we have of the information that we have right now. And so with the information we have right now, many companies are all of their data is being ingested. They're literally giving it away. They're committing intellectual surrender. They're just saying, take it. We don't know what to do with AI. So we're just going to use these large language models. We're going to use these foundational models that are building in the background in the labs to become world models, which world models will have not only access to what we see now with like agents and agentic, we're talking about past agentic to where we have autonomous agents, but these agents will then be able to interact with IoT devices, Internet of Things. And so
So
all those,
this is
yeah,
such an important point, but you've like jumped 10 steps into in just a few seconds. I want to break this down for the audience. GPTs at the beginning, they could just talk English, right? So if you could communicate with them, they could do stuff like, rewriting a sentence with good grammar. What's happening though, when we have all these companies all around the world using now these GPTs in their actual business processes. Now AI is learning about your products, about your business process, about your industry, and about your secret sauce, about how you do business. So what's happening is we're transitioning from a thing that sounded like a human being, but didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge that wasn't on the internet. And usually companies don't go and put all their secrets and sources on the internet, on their marketing
for good
website
reason.
for good reason. But now you're having these discussions with the AI on a daily basis about your secret sauce, about your strategy, about your thinking, stepping through that whole thing. So from just a simple kind of like language model, it's turning into something much, much more bigger. And it's really almost, we could almost predict, and keep me honest here if this is what you were meaning, it's almost to the level that AI will understand our businesses and maybe certain businesses will be totally automated because AI kind of understands everything about it at one stage. And this is kind of scary in many ways. How do we get to that stage and not like lose half of the employment?
Yeah. That's like the big question a lot of people ask. The aspect there is I was just speaking like in Italy and they asked the same kind of question, but the question was also geared towards, hey, why is the United States firing everybody? So and
Yet,
it's like, we're not doing that
yet.
here. And I'm like, I get it. So the United States there's a lot of companies that are laying off, but it is hard. It's hard to know, are they laying off because it's actually working? AI is working for them, or are they laying off because it's a scapegoat and they're saying, here's how we save our bottom line? The funny thing is, that when you have a company and you go to all these like shareholder meetings and you hear all the news, anytime a company says, we're making so much more money because we built this thing and it's lots of value, what do? They've always hired a bunch of people because they need to make the work done. So if a company is saying AI is making them a whole bunch of money, why are they then laying a bunch of people off? Like that actually doesn't make sense because they're laying
Well,
off
that's a
more than they're.
short-term behavior, right? You want to
It
first
is.
strengthen the stock price, get your kickback for that, but then yes, you should reinvest within short term if you actually have a
Right.
go-to-market that makes sense. So it's a mixed bag to a certain degree.
It is, but at the same time, enterprises are very much not process oriented. They think they are. They're more workflow and task based oriented. And when you actually let people go, you're letting context and internal context of your company walk out the door. And so you may hire you if you fire like 10,000 people, that doesn't mean all of them had massive amount of context. That means like probably a good like 1,000 of them were the only reason certain things ran. And you didn't know that until you get rid of them. So it is kind of like a classic, like if I turn the server off and people cry out and go, oh my, maybe we turn the server back on. But the problem is with people, they're not going to come back and work for you once you let them go. They're going to say, sorry, I'm going to go take my context. I'm going to go take it to another company that actually values my opinion, values where maybe I belong there in those kind of situations.
It's really difficult because at the end of the day, it's a question of how supply and demand really balances out. I'll give you an example, right? The scary side of this is now I am delivering basically the work of 10 people, right? And I'm doing hardcore engineering code on my kind of day job. So my thinking is that, I might not need to hire 100, 200, 300 people. as revenue comes in, I can keep that team, 10 people as opposed to 300 people. So that's 200 people plus that will not have a job, right? That's a massive decrease in employment. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, what if my company exists and grew and created that revenue only because we were able to do that? And there's another 50 companies like me. So that supply and demand almost balances off. So it's really difficult to know what's going to happen in the future from that perspective. Are we going to have a massive additional demand because of the surplus of supply happening at the same time? So I'm not sure I have a good answer there.
Yeah, there's a scarcity thing there too. But this is why most companies are asking like where the ROI is. And my normal go-to answer is like the fact of it is you should not be firing anybody and you should just stop hiring everyone. Because if you keep who you got and you start gaining value, great. Now you have people that have more time. Now you have people like yourself that are doing the job of one person doing 10 people's roles. Well, then if you're not hiring anybody, you're not spending the money to pay for that person. You're not training them for 6 months. They're not leaving like because they found a different job on the new hiring. Like yes, attrition is going to happen. And yes, you still will need to hire some people. But when you have those conversations and people come to you and say, hey, Ari, as a leader, we need to hire 10 people to do this job. Your first reaction, like any enterprise, you go, great. Have you talked to our automation AI team and found a way to see if they can do it? And if they can't do it, great, we're going to hire some people. But if not, no, we're going to automate it or we're going to build AI solutions for it, probably through automation and then AI. But in general, this is how this is going to run and should be running in the future. Yet again, that's the kind of the American standpoint. But when I was speaking in Italy, they said, Doug, we're not firing anybody already. We're just keeping them. And I was like, oh, great. You've already answered the question. They go, but hold on. What do I do with the people if they're not doing as much work? What do we do with them? And I said, okay, that goes into a different scenario here. And that says like, well, SaaS, like software as a service is kind of going away. It's becoming more agent as a service because agents can take execution layer. Like software as a service was very much like teach one, click one, do a thing, access. Now we have agents as a service where it's like, okay, we click one, can do all these things. We have access. Now we can execute on that layer. Okay, then what's next? We have vibe coding and all this other stuff. Oh, my answer to the people in Italy that I was talking to in this municipality was like, hey, those people are going to become product owners. You're going to create your own things. You won't go out and buy all this vendor stuff. You'll actually just vibe code whatever you need with your own internal information. So you stop feeding these models and committing intellectual surrender. And they were like, oh, that actually makes sense.
So let's talk about that for a moment. I'll make an argument that in the past pre-AI, we have a whole bunch of SaaS because in the 80s, we tried to build our own software and we figured out that building software is really hard. So these SaaS companies came along and they're like, well, we'll do what you need. It will be kind of what you need, but not exactly. And if you wanted to do exactly your business process, either tough noogies or pay a whole lot of money for customization. And that turned into the SAPs and Oracle business models of the world. That paradigm has significantly changed. What happens if we go back to the 80s, right? We introduce AI and suddenly, well, you know, you can build whatever you want and it's cheap and it's easy and it actually works. That's what's happening today.
Yeah.
So now your
Although
chemical company,
security
your
and stuff hasn't
manufacturing
caught up yet.
company, sure, but there's ways to work around that, right? Now suddenly, your chemical company that was never in the business of writing software can potentially create their own software to their processes that creates a competitive advantage for them. And it's not the same software that everybody else is using. So, one of the predictions is that, well, all these software engineers that are going to be fired from SaaS companies are going to be hired by hundreds of other different companies that traditionally have never written software. And that is one possible scenario. Let me ask you this. Keep me honest. You have kids. Remind me, what ages are they?
Like early teens. Yeah.
Okay, my condolences. My I have teens as well,
Not to get really
but
bad.
I just had to deal with my 13-year-old daughter just disappearing. So one of the things that I know you're concerned about, because I am as a dad, is the future of our children. What are you telling your daughter to study or to learn or to get good at? I heard one mom say, "Oh, they should go into computer science." As a computer science scientist myself, looking at AI and how we need a fraction of the people, I was like, "No, and then on the other end, I'm like, well, maybe actually the arts is a thing that is more important than ever before. But then we see all this, these artists unhappy about. What is the skills of the future? this is a very practical question for us moms and dads trying to, support our children to be resilient.
Yeah, I mean, resilience is a big thing, right? And especially with an ever changing environment, I tend to look back and say, me growing up, I was a zennial, right? And that's a X and millennial, and the middle part there, there's this zennial thing that some people know about. People that are in it definitely know about it. But what it is essentially is the zennials are a microcosm group of individuals that were born between the two. And the reason why it's important is because by before age 20, it was all analog. And after age 20, so as we're going into the companies and the businesses and trying to work, we had to learn digital very, very fast. And that's how we became about. And so there's this whole Zennial thing. So where do the kids come out now? And the kids right now are in this Gen AI phase. Most of them are, if they're in their teens now, they're kind of growing up with it. They don't really know how to use it. The institutional, hierarchical areas are saying don't use it. It's cheating if you do. Everybody's trying to figure it out. It's the new calculator back when things, or the printing press in France that they
Yes.
burned all down because there are too many
Yes.
newspapers. All these things are happening all at once. There is a point that you mentioned there, Ari, is where when technology pushes again, it's that pendulum swing of things, and there is going to be a pushback, and so definitely everybody, a lot of people, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are going to look at the arts, and the arts isn't a bad idea. Now, when people ask me, hey, Doug, where are your kids going to go to college and what are they going to go learn? I say, I'm going to tell them to get into philosophy because the future of anything and how we look at it and all the work I've done in AI and everybody I've talked to in AI, we have more human conversations now, very human
Than ever
conversations
before.
than ever I've ever heard. There is no amount of self-help books inside of Barnes and Noble and on Amazon, anything, than there is with AI already answering and kind of causing that interaction to look at it. I think one point earlier we were talking about how AI is kind of everywhere. It's in all these businesses learning the verticals. The other cool thing is that, and this is recently I've kind of dived into this, is that different cultures, different languages, like German versus English or English versus Japanese, have different meanings behind the words. And so when you go to Germany and you're like, wow, everything here from cars to computers are very masculine. And there's all these aspects, yet the mothers are usually the dominant figure in the household. And then you come to the United States and all those same things are very feminine. And then you have like a mixed bag of like who's wearing the pants kind of thing, but all of those things matter in how the AI interacts with the people. And so we're seeing a lot of that too. And many people haven't even kind of grasped that yet. And so that's why I say it's a very human conversation. And I think that no matter how you swing it, it's like DVDs and CDs and then the radio, or not the radio, but like the record player, or like, VHS and Betamax. Like we're going to have
Video killed
a,
the radio star.
yeah, we're going to have that mix of what goes where.
Brilliant. Doug, this has been absolutely delightful. We are at the end of the time. We have only one question that we ask every single guest. It's the only question that's scripted in this show, as our audience knows. And it's a hard question because it's personal. If you had to think back throughout your leadership, management, personal, family, whatever history, whether this was 2 years ago or 20 years ago, what was the hardest point? And more importantly, what was the lesson or advice that you would give yourself back?
Interesting. If I was to give myself a lesson, it would be to tell myself that in the span of my human life and most human lives, there are four moments that you have. And those four moments are defined in 5-year stints. And in those 5-year stints, you have to have the grit, determination, understand you're going to fall on your face, understand that it's not going to make sense where you're going to be at the end of that 5 years. But if you want something and you want to strive for a particular aspect or whatever, it will take you about 5 years to get to where you want to be, to show up, to be at that point. And you won't even know when it happens, but it'll happen. And you have 4 times to do it in your lifetime.
Doug, thank you so much for joining the show. I appreciate you.
Yeah. I think it's been great, Ari. I appreciate the conversation, and it's always good to have a just a talk.